1 minute to the studio.
Good morning. When Bill Bennett walks into the opening of the new session in Victoria tomorrow as Premier of British Columbia, a Premier very much under attack, he will have a beautiful shining halo around his head because of the fact that he has announced as Premier of British Columbia that there will be forthwith a 7-year moratorium on all uranium mining and exploration in British Columbia. This should not be a surprise to you. First of all, let me say, it's obviously going to be the most popular step his government has taken in its years in office. He tried to avoid it for a while because of the pressure from the uranium mining interests in Canada who are very anxious to get at our deposits throughout British Columbia. And Bill Bennett was very frank indeed when he said, I'm doing this because of the groundswell of antipathy from all of the people in BC. Was he right to do it? Yes, I suppose he was. Did he have to do it? Yes, he had to do something to give him some positive ammunition when he faces a session which is going to be, by all accounts, the roughest and toughest he has seen. There's going to be dirty tricks, there's going to be gerrymandering, there's going to be lack of action, it'll be alleged of cabinet solidarity. All kinds of problems face him. So he's taken a good, sharp, shrewd political decision and gone in on the 7-year moratorium on uranium mining and exploration. Mind you, he's lost a few friends in the industrial mining areas across Canada. No doubt about that. And British Columbia may well have lost a bit of revenue and a fair number of jobs. And he may well have done this particular thing at the wrong time for his overall relationships with business and industry, which are so vital to a social credit government. It perhaps proves one thing. In fact, it does prove one thing. Bill Bennett will do whatever is necessary to stay in power. Mind you, even at that, if politicians do the good thing, because they know they're losing the grip on the population, it is better than nothing. But the opposition, if they're half awake, will not allow this piece of populist politics to divert them from their attention to getting the social credit government back on the right ethical tracks. After the break. More than 11,000 of the 12,500 registered nurses in British Columbia voted in their third strike vote, just taken place, the third strike vote since 1968. This time, 90% of them cast their ballots. And 98.1 of that 90% said, yes, we want a strike. Are you in favor of a strike? Yes or no? The answer was yes. Now, before you meet the registered nurses this morning, I may be right or I may be wrong, but it seems to me that the basic issue, which is affecting all the RNABC members in British Columbia, is the fact that they seem to have fallen far behind other employees in the British Columbia scene. So far behind that they finally wakened up and they're going to put the pressure on. Just let me give you the comparisons that the nurses themselves use. A worker in a liquor store makes $8.53 an hour. A checkout clerk in a supermarket makes $8.78 an hour. The base rate for the IWA is $9.06 an hour. A bus driver $10.41 an hour. A carpenter, in-town carpenter, $12.38 an hour. And a registered nurse, basic starting rate, I think it is, we'll check that in a moment, is $8 an hour. Why have the nurses fallen so far behind? Here to tell us their problems this morning and explain the situation to them are three people. First, Nora Paton, who is the Chief Executive Officer of the RNABC. Second, Carole Needham, who is a member of the Bargaining Committee. Right, Carole?
Yes.
And thirdly, Malcolm Wilkinson, who is the Chief Labour Negotiator for the RNABC. Nora, is there going to be a strike, in your considered opinion, right now?
The nurses are prepared for a strike. However, we think it's a bit away from it yet, and it entirely depends on the Health Labor Relations Association. The ball's in their court to get serious and start negotiating.
Now, we'll get down to that offer in a moment, but since you took your strike vote, has there been any indication of a new attitude by HLRA?
Well, we have not talked with HLRA, but we have talked to the mediator, and he has called meetings for the beginning of next week.
Now, you say it depends on HLRA. I've been listening and reading your reports, and somewhere along the line, someone said that the settlement you want is going to cost $50 million in 1 extra year, or in 2 years?
1 year.
$50 million in 1 year. Where are the HLRA going to get $50 million in 1 year?
Well, we all know where the money comes from. And, you know, in labor circles, it's called the ghost at the bargaining table.
Rafe Mayer being, or the Labour Minister, Alan Williams, and Rafe Mayer, and the Premier being the trinity of ghosts at the bargaining table. Is that correct?
Well, let's put it, it's the government.
The government.
The government pays the cost of health care.
Next, I'm going to go to Malcolm Wilkinson. What offer have you received? On the face of it, it would seem to be quite substantial. And how close was I to the nitty-gritty when I compared the wages?
Oh, you're right on when you made the comparison, Jack. HLRA's offer is about 21% over 2 years. And on the surface, you say, well, 21% is not a bad offer. But you have to look on what the base is built. As you know, 100% of nothing is still nothing. And the problem that we have is that the base rate of the nurse is currently so low that we have to have a major adjustment, and 21% over 2 years just doesn't do it.
What is the major adjustment you want, that you are seeking right now?
We're looking for a wage increase, a catch-up we call it, of $145 a month on the general duty nurse, and that would then bring the nurse partially back up to where she should be. And on top of that, then for 1980, a 1980 wage increase, we're looking for an 18% wage increase.
And 1981?
We're really looking for a 1-year collective agreement.
They're offering you 21% over 2 years.
2 years.
Let me get this straight. What is the average wage, if you're talking about 145 a month, of a nurse right now at the starting rate?
The starting rate of a nurse is $1,305 a month. Now that is a registered graduate nurse.
So you want 145 right now to bring that up to 1450.
Right.
And then on top of that, you want 18%.
And that would bring the rate up to $1,711 a month for the start of a general duty registered nurse.
Is that reasonable?
Yeah, we think so.
Why is it reasonable, Carole, to bring it up from 1305 to 1711 for a starting rate for a registered general duty nurse? Is that right?
Right.
I think it's reasonable from the point of view that nurses spend time in training. They have to be, they have a responsible position in the hospital hierarchy. They have a lot of decisions that rest entirely on their shoulders. And I think that they should be paid adequately for that responsibility.
Why have you fallen so badly behind? I mean, 1,711 for a registered nurse doesn't seem on the face of it that much. As a matter of fact, in positions in the BC Ferry, without even being an officer, you can easily make 1,711 a month for standing around on a ferry, or working hard on a ferry. Let me take back that snarky remark. Why have you fallen badly behind? Have the nurses been asleep for years?
Oh, no, I don't think we've been asleep, but what you must realize is that we've come off 8 years of either binding arbitration, binding industrial inquiry, 3 years of AIB, and recently right out of a very bad binding arbitration award.
Now, you're not obligated to go for binding arbitration.
No.
On the face of it, do you have freedom to strike? What is the position on that?
We have the right to strike. But there's no doubt, Jack, we're an essential service, and we understand that. And I think we're very willing to maintain that responsibility, and that's why we're saying that we will not abandon seriously ill patients. The question is on essentiality, and what is essential?
Well, now we have a precedence in the strike of other hospital workers under the Wyler Labour Relations Board decision. Perhaps you could give me your position on that as a union. Because are you not actually covered by the Essential Services Act and named in it as hospital workers?
Yes, no doubt about that, Jack. What we're doing, though, is we are establishing in each hospital an Essential Services Committee. And we think that it's proper that the nurses in each community, in each hospital, make a determination as to what essential services would be continued should job action become necessary. And the position we've taken right from the beginning is that we will provide essential services.
But what's an essential service?
Well, that's the question. That as a layperson, I'm not a nurse, I don't think it's proper for me to answer that.
Is a biopsy for a potential cancer an essential service?
But see, Jack, that's the thing. I can't answer that as a layperson, and I don't think you can. But that's why we're saying that the nurses in the local hospital should make that determination.
Could you make that decision, you think, in consultation with the medical profession? Would you have to take a guidance from the medical profession on what's an essential service?
I think nurses in the field have the ability and the knowledge to make those decisions.
It would certainly mean, would it not, Nora? I don't want to distract you from the labour situation, but this is going to come up anyway throughout it. It would certainly mean, though, that you would be prepared to man certain aspects of hospital treatment throughout even a prolonged strike.
That's right.
More with the RNABC spokesman on this crisis for British Columbia, and it is a crisis, after the break. First of all, to Nora Paton, how do the doctors feel about your position?
I understand that the BC Medical Association is endorsing our position and has come out very strongly in favour of our position.
Well, that's a help for you anyway, isn't it?
We're very delighted.
Even though when you're on strike, their incomes will drop very sharply. If
Yes.
you're on strike. What's the position with HLRA, please? They've offered you, I don't quite understand their offer, but I want you to tell me about it.
Okay, basically, Jack, they've offered us what we calculate out to be about 21% over 2 years. And that is almost all in wages. And it works out to about 10.5% in the first year and 10% in the second year.
And but I see in the paper now, since you announced your strike vote, that they may have a new offer up their sleeves. How could that come about now? Tell me what you know about that.
It's a very interesting way for them to negotiate, Jack. I saw the article in the newspaper this morning that there's a substantial offer about to come. a very interesting way for them to tell us. And we're certainly looking forward to receiving that offer next Tuesday when we meet with them.
And is your nose a little bit out of joint because of the offers which have been voted on by the Hospital Employees Union?
I won't say our nose is out of joint, but it's very hard for us to understand how the Health Labour Relations Association can negotiate with one union in the hospital industry, offer them a much larger settlement than they've offered us, and still take the position that they're being responsible in the nurses' negotiations.
Offered you 21% over 2 years, offered the HEU 25.5% over 2 years.
Plus a number of other adjustments. So some of the people under the other union would get, we would calculate more than 25%.
And the 2,400 windfall package for employees who have been with the hospital for 5 years.
That has not been offered to the nurses. And the question we ask is, are you being responsible, Health Labour Relations?
How far do you want your 145 a month catch-up to apply to? Just the beginning of this contract?
Our agreement expired at the end of last year, and the catch-up we're looking for would be effective January the 1st this year.
January 1st, 1980?
Right.
Carole, what is the feeling among the nurses? Did all the hospitals allow you to have ballot boxes on their premises?
As the returning officer for the province, I was writing letters to all hospital administrators and instructing our deputy returning officers in the field to apply to their hospital administrators to have the vote. And not all allowed the nurses, not all allowed the ballot boxes on the hospital premises, but the greater majority did.
The big ones like the General did, for instance?
No, they did not. They voted at the Plaza 500.
Well, they had to go to the Plaza 500 to vote.
But I must be honest and say that because of the physical setup of VGH, they did not ask. They took the vote across the street because of the physical setup.
Can the nurses be faulted at all for the kind of problems that we have in supply of nurses? Can you tell me if nurses are dropping out of the profession because of the wage levels? I mean, $8 an hour for a beginner, but your supervisors are making a lot more than $8 an hour, aren't they?
Oh, yes, the supervisors are. There's no doubt, Jack, that I'm convinced that the wages and working conditions has a big effect in terms of recruitment of nurses in this province. And I believe we have a shortage of nursing manpower, and this is part and parcel of it. Because after all, you know, the beginning nurse at $8 an hour, she works shifts, she works 3 shifts, she works weekends, and, you know, that's pretty tough.
Are many of them married? Or nearly all of your nurses married, or just the most senior ones?
Oh, no, there's a large percentage of our nurses that are married. There's quite a large percentage of nurses that are single parents or the sole support of families, too.
How do your wages compare with other nurses' wages across the country? Who can tell me that?
No.
Malcolm?
Okay. Ontario nurses and Quebec nurses are now paid more than nurses in British Columbia, despite the fact that wage rates in British Columbia tend to be higher than the rest of the country. We are well down the list if you compare the rates that are paid to nurses to average rates in the province. We're well behind the national average.
But still what sticks in your throat is the fact that people who do not have the long training and skill of a nurse get so much more money in union contracts in British Columbia.
That's one of the factors. The other thing that we have to look at, though, is where does the nurse relate to other people in society? And she's quite a long way behind in British Columbia.
Should I ask you how much other hospital employees make per hour? I know you're not that keen on creating problems within your own professions, but I think it'd be fair if you can give me some valid comparison. I mean, is there anybody, I have a suspicion that people working in Riverview or whatnot and other jobs will make a lot more money than a nurse does on the basic $8 an hour.
I don't have hourly rates here in front of me for other hospital workers, Jack. But for example, and I'm certainly not, don't assume that I'm putting down the other group here, okay? We're not saying that they're not worth this. We think they are. But a cleaner in a hospital under the proposal offered to them by HLRA would make $1,238 a month, January 1st, 1980.
That's right, and here we have a registered nurse who, at the moment, under their offer, would make $1,305 plus 10.5%, which is $130, which is $1,600, roughly speaking.
No, $1,440.
$1,440, and a cleaner makes how much?
Under their offer, $1,238.
Well, I know comparisons are odious, but you have fallen behind, have you not?
There's no doubt. Yes.
Well, I don't know what. We're going to hear from some nurses on the phone this morning, too. And you're going to hear from the public and see if they support your position. Do you care to gamble that much? Any other basic facts I've omitted to give? How was the vote? Was the vote evenly spread? You had 90%. Of course, you had a 98.1% in favor.
The vote.
Do you realize what that means, Jack? When 98.1% is a number that you have a hard time getting a hold of. But consider the fact that there were 11,200 nurses who voted. And of those nurses who voted, only 208 in the whole province voted no to a strike. There were 10,980 nurses or something like that voted yes, and 208 voted no.
So therefore you feel it's more than just a kind of blank check to the union executive to bargain in a tough manner.
That's right.
Your questions to the nurses' representatives after the break.
Milking the geriatric patients like there was no bloody tomorrow.
Yeah.
30.
Nora Paton, Malcolm Wilkinson, and Carole Needham from the RNABC. How can you go on strike or even talk about one, Nora Paton, if you haven't got a strike fund?
Well, that shouldn't stop us. But
Yeah.
no, we don't have a strike fund. And the nurses knew that before they voted to be in favor of strike. But, you know, I think there are ways and means, too, that we can help people who really must have some money in terms of the essential service, because there will be nurses still in there. And we'll juggle them around so that nobody loses too much.
And like in the last, you can rotate the work necessary that's available for the people who need it most.
Yes?
Right, Malcolm? Right, Carole? Do you agree with that?
Yes.
Right.
Maybe you should have a strike fund in the future, though. Maybe now that you're really coming out as a trade union and not just a kind of snotty professional group, maybe you should go all the way and start up a strike fund.
Well, we don't have a strike fund this year, Jack, but I think a very significant thing is that we have taken strike votes in every hospital in the province. And our plan is that if this fight we have is a fight belonging to all the nurses in the province. And if we give strike notice, we will not give it on a selective basis. If we give strike notice, we'll give it in all hospitals in the province.
All at the same time.
Simultaneously.
How about the lady Minto and Ganges? How was the vote there?
100%, Jack.
In favor of strike?
In favor of strike.
Ganges is in Salt
Stay
Spring
in
Island.
Vancouver.
Yeah, better stay in Vancouver this weekend. Telephone calls. Go ahead, please.
Yes, Mr. Webster. There's a patient at the VGH burn ward in the fall, and I'd like to give a vote of confidence to the nurses. The people up there were just fantastic, and I think they're worth $20 an hour, not just $8. You can ask any patient, I'm sure, would go along with that. Thank you.
Hope all the calls are not going to be like that, eh?
Oh, I
we
hope they are.
hope they are.
You hope they are. Next one. Go ahead, please.
Well, Mr. Webster, I'm another one that's got the same call. I was in the hospital for about 8 months, and without the nurses, you'd have one hell of a depressing time in there, and I give my full support, and I find them a lot more valuable than what the BC Hydro bus drivers are getting paid for their work.
Thank you. From Chilliwack, go ahead, please.
I would like to ask the panel why we have zone pay for nurses from Newfoundland to Victoria.
Don't understand the
don't
question.
understand
Who
it either.
does? What do you mean zone pay for nurses from Newfoundland to Victoria?
Halifax, Nova Scotia, at the present time, is more than $2,000 a year less than what they get in Vancouver.
Malcolm? Just provincial bargaining.
That's provincial bargaining. I can't confirm what the rates are in Nova Scotia, but
they are.
But rates are negotiated on a province-wide basis.
Do you know what the rates are in Nova Scotia?
No, he just told you he doesn't offhand. But the fact is that in all these matters, this is provincial bargaining on a provincial basis.
The other point I'd like to make, though, is what are the average rates in Nova
A little
Scotia
while ago.
compared to those in British Columbia?
Right.
They're a heck of a lot lower.
From Victoria, BC, go ahead, please.
Jack, I'd like to point out that nurses, more so than bus drivers or plumbers, electricians, or anything like that, are constantly upgrading their education all the time. And if anybody deserves a raise, healthcare people do.
Can anyone of the panel tell me, I used the figure $8 from your documents for the beginning rate for a starting nurse. If you get your catch-up and your 18% in 1 year on a one-year contract, what would it bring the rate up to?
Just hang on a shake, Jack.
We'll let him work that out and take another call. Oh,
960. That's right off the top of my head. Without
less
having
than $10.
I would think so, yeah.
Go ahead, please.
Jack, I think the RNs in this province deserve everything they're getting and even more. I haven't seen the training program they have to face. I think it's fantastic, you know.
Oh, by the way, please don't let me do all the answering. If you're answering, Nora, will you answer the camera too? And if either of you answering, you answer to Big John and camera. Camera what? There's no number on it. Three. You make your point again, please. Where are you?
Hello?
Make your point, please.
Yes, I think it's the nurses in this province deserve even more than being offered. I mean, I think they deserve everything they're asking for, if not more. I think their training program amplifies how well-trained they are. They're one of the best trained nurses in Canada.
That makes me wonder whether we should maybe up our demands a little bit, Jack. You've had four so far saying we're underpaid.
This is a bit much, isn't it, Carole?
It's nice to hear.
Go ahead, please.
Yes, these people seem to consider themselves professionals, but they're comparing their wages to janitors and checkout girls. I don't think they can have it both ways. Professionals have always traded off money against a rewarding job. Why don't they look at salaries of beginning university graduates? Even lawyers, after they've articled, start at $1,500 a month. That's 8 years of training. There's no comparison between their skills and a nurse.
One of you, please. Why don't you compare your salaries instead of to the unionized groups to professional groups?
Okay, let's look at the professional groups. Look at accountants and lawyers and doctors. What kind of rates do they get? They're certainly not running around at $1,305 a month. The highest rate currently paid in a British Columbia hospital for a member of our organization is the top paid supervisor. That's the supervisor in the largest hospital in the province. That's after 6 years of service in that hospital as a minimum, and the top rate is $1,924 per month.
That's as a nurse supervisor.
That's a nurse supervisor, and that person could be in charge of the whole hospital. In fact, Nora probably is in charge of the whole hospital on afternoons or night shifts.
But the caller has a point. You want to develop it a little further?
I think they're comparing starting wages. That's what they're complaining about. Look at what other university grads start at. $1,300 to $1,500 a month is about the average.
Nora?
Yeah, I wouldn't deny that, though I haven't, I don't have those kinds of figures in front of me. I think, though, that if you're going to, if we started to compare with doctors and dentists and lawyers, there's a very basic difference between nurses and those professions, because nurses are salaried employees. And doctors and lawyers and accountants to some degree and dentists are self-employed and a fee for service. And that's a very different concept.
Well, thanks for your point, ma'am. Go ahead, please.
It's time the nurses were coming into their own. Years ago, when they went in to train for nurses, my mother had to make all my sister's uniforms, and they got very little paid in Calgary, and enough for their books. And the work that these girls do, it's a disgrace for what they get. It's about time that these nurses were getting an increase. And the doctors leave all them for all the work to do. They come in and look at you in the morning, but after that, who does all the work? The nurses do it all. Good luck to you, and I hope that they win.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Nobody's going to knock
Jack,
the doctors, are they?
I'd like to talk on this professionalism thing just a little bit longer. Nurses certainly are not giving up their professional concerns by starting to take an interest in their economic concerns. And in fact, if the nurses don't do something now about their economic concerns, then their professionalism will suffer. We have a chronic shortage of nurses in British Columbia. And I think one of the major reasons to that shortage of nurses is the fact that nurses are so poorly paid. Unless we do something about the rates that are paid to nurses now, there will be fewer and fewer nurses in the province, and that means that the healthcare system goes right downhill.
Well, now, you say poorly paid. Once they get up, that $8, does the $8 apply to a general duty nurse?
That's right.
That's right.
And then you go up quite substantially on your present scales, don't you, to supervisor, $24.73. What's that?
A supervisor is the top. Let me have a look at what you've got here.
That's our proposal.
These are our proposals, Jack. Those are not what the nurses are getting.
Oh, my mistake.
Yeah, the supervisor, though, is the person who's in charge of the hospital on afternoons or nights, and that could be the largest hospital in the province.
What was that rate again,
1924, from memory.
Did I take you or did I forget you, caller?
Oh, I'm waiting for you.
That's you. Go ahead, please.
Okay, I work in the health field. I'm an HSA member, and I'm at the top of my salary scale, which is $10.43 an hour. I'm a medical technologist. But I am solidly behind the nurses. I feel that we signed a poor contract, but we won't go into that. I really wonder, though, why there is not more disparity or a better range for the nurses. I feel nurses who work in the intensive care field work hard, exceptionally hard, on a one-to-one basis. And I don't think there's enough. They should be paid at a different rate.
Carole, what do you feel about that? She's HSA, Health Sciences, right?
Yes.
And she's a medical technician.
Yes.
How do you feel about the disparity in rates between nurses, and that some rates should be much higher?
I think that nurses receive a general training, a general broad spectrum education while they're in training. And the experience factor that comes into working in a specialized unit is possibly something that could be looked into later. But at this time, a registered nurse, a graduate registered nurse, is qualified to work in all areas in the hospital or in the medical.
Good. Now, you made when does your bad contract expire?
We signed a 27-month contract.
And you're not happy with it?
No, I wasn't for it in the first place.
Thank you, ma'am. Webster, Nora Paton, Malcolm Wilkinson, and Carole Needham, RNABC after the break. The cost, I'm told, of the nurses' demands at the moment on the $145 catch-up and their 18% in each of 2 years, right, Malcolm?
18% in 1 year.
18% in 1 year. And did you tell me $50 million?
Yes.
The cost in 1 year?
I would think that it's probably pretty close to that.
You're obviously prepared to modify your demands to some extent.
Why?
Well, I'm asking you.
But Jack, the government's just indicated over the last few weeks that they have a surplus that runs somewhere like $300 million in the first 3 quarters of this year. So that's, you know, even if it is a $50 million settlement, that still leaves $250 million in the pot.
Listen, if it's $50 million for the nurses alone, what's the 25.5% going to cost the HEU? What about the civil servants? What about the ferry workers?
It's about the same.
About the same?
I would think so. You know,
the health bill in this province is somewhere around $1 billion, isn't it? Or is it $2 billion? It's so big it doesn't really matter. And you really think that Bennett will spring the money?
It's all very well for the government to say that we're going to keep the cost of health care down. That's a decision that the government can make. They're elected to make those decisions. However, if they make that decision, then they have to be pre-prepared to lower either the standard of service given or the quantity of service given. They can't get a free ride on nurses and provide the same level of care.
What would happen if they give you the $50 million package in 1 year, and then down comes the word from Mayor or Bennett, chop chop?
Well, it would seem to me, Jack, that the Health Labour Relations Association has a responsibility when they sit at that bargaining table, and it would, if they in fact are negotiating a settlement, I would think that they should be know whether or not that money will be forthcoming.
Well, they did. What was the cost of the package they offered you? Do you happen to know by any chance, on an annual basis?
No, we don't really, you know, we don't have all the data that we need to calculate out costs.
No.
So, you know, the estimate of 40 to 50 million that we come up with
is still a rough estimate.
It's a rough estimate.
That's right. It's a frightening figure, though, isn't it?
Yes.
Next. Go ahead, please.
Good morning. The RNABC and the union dues that the registered nurses are paying each year amounts to $2.5 million to re-register every year. And there's no strike fund.
Let me answer.
Why? One, is the man correct that your dues total $2.5 million a year?
No.
No.
That's not correct.
It's $1.25 million to the RNABC, and the union dues amount to another $1.25 million.
I think that there are two arms that we're talking about. We're talking about the Registered Nurses Association of British Columbia, which is the professional arm. And it's very true that nurses pay $100 a year to that professional association. The Labor Relations Division, which is the union arm, the nurses pay 0.5% of gross monthly earnings. Now, those two funds are separate. The two organizations are autonomous and separate.
Why should the...
Oh, and I want to get that clear. Obviously, you pick in, say, $1.5 million, $1.1 million, or $1.2 million for your professional aspects of the RNABC. And for the other one, you'll pick up something around $800,000 or $900,000 for labor relations.
Well, since we just had our audit done, I can tell you that it's a little under $1 million that we collected in dues in 1979.
Okay, make your point now, caller.
Why should the registered nurses not join the HEU?
Why should they?
Apparently, I'm looking at the HEU proposed master agreement, and it's and many of the fringe areas you're not even asking for the same as what they have.
That is not true. We have a number of demands on the bargaining table for significant improvements in fringe benefits. But there is no question that the Hospital Employees Union does a very good job for their members. We're not denying that at all.
What kind of fringe benefits do you have? Do you think the nurses should have too?
Well, for every year's service, they get an extra day's holiday. So if they work there 5 years, they get an extra week's holiday.
Anything else? Do you have that?
That was negotiated this year. That's in the offer.
That's a new one in the proposal.
That's in the offer that HLRA hospitals are now voting on.
What else?
A painter will be receiving $1,800, a carpenter $1,900, an electrician $2,052, and my main point is why don't you compare yourself with your peers, the teachers and the social workers?
You're a member of HEU, obviously. Well, the teachers do pretty well, don't they?
They do better than the nurses.
Yes.
Oh, yeah, teachers do better than the nurses. And teachers also have a 3% income, I think it's for 8, 10, or 11 years, which is never counted in on their increases.
I think something else to remember, too, is that, as Nora mentioned, the RNABC has two divisions, two separate divisions, the professional division and the labor relations division.
The union division.
The union division, okay. The union division has only been off on its own now for about a year.
This is the reason for the new militancy.
2 years we've been collecting dues.
Yes.
We've increased our staff from 2 or 3 people 3 years ago. We have now 20 people. Okay, we're starting to service the membership a lot more, and so it's understandable that maybe we have fallen behind because we didn't have the resources in the past, but now we have them.
That's interesting. In other words, what I said offhand the other day, but not being a professional, I said snotty, I didn't mean it, professional organization, you are now 50% a militant trade union in terms of your application of your effort.
We are a trade union, yes, and we're determined. If we're militant, that's your definition. We're just determined that we're going to regain our place economically.
How long is it since the nurses were what you might call a special group who were well above the levels of other people in hospital employ in wages?
Well,
10 years ago.
10 years ago, the differential, let's just take two groups. You take the registered nurse and the practical nurse, and those are the two groups that work very closely together in hospitals. 10 years ago, the differential between the registered nurse and the practical nurse was about 30%. It's now fallen to 15%, and given the offer that HLRA has made to the Hospital Employees Union and the practical nurse, and the one that they've made to us, the registered nurses, HLRA's proposal would result in that differential dropping to 2%, and our position is that that is totally unacceptable.
Just a minute, let me get that clear. Are you telling me that with their offer on the table right now, HLRA's offer to you and HLRA's offer to HEU, that if and when these were both implemented, you'd only be 2% above the practical nurse?
Jack,
Hey, that's right.
On the offer that HLRA has given to us, as of August the 1st this year, a practical nurse would start at exactly the same rate as a new registered nurse. $1,368 a month, I think, is the number.
Now, let me get that again. You're telling me that with their...
$1,362.
Okay, HLRA's offer to the practical nurses, if approved on this 2-year proposal, as of what date?
August the 1st this year.
August the 1st, 1980. A practical nurse would be almost right on the nose at $1,368.
$1,362 is exactly the same rate that we've been offered for a new RN, new registered nurse, and that's what has been agreed to by HLRA for the practical nurse.
Is that fair, Carole?
No, I don't think it's fair at all.
And for obvious reasons.
Obvious reasons. If you continually downgrade a profession by not recognizing it either financially or in working conditions, if you continually downgrade year after year after year, sooner or later it's going to come through and tell on the number of applicants you're going to have to go in training.
Well, you know, this is an area that you're not particularly keen on exploring, I know, but that's the most effective thing you said this morning.
And it reflects the totally irresponsible attitude of the Health Labour Relations Association.
You mean the Health Labour Relations Association doesn't care about the differentiation in skills, training and standards between practicals and RNs?
What other assumptions can we make?
That's right.
Webster and the nurses after the break. Never say anything off camera you're not prepared to say on camera, Webster. And I made a snarky remark to Nora and Malcolm and Carole just now by saying, 22 people in your Labour Relations Division, you'll finish up with a bureaucracy like the BC Teachers Federation. And you gave me a response.
I said that 10 years ago when I started this job, there was myself and a part-time clerk typist. And if we are going to service our members, we need the resources to do so, and I think that we have now begun to build those resources, and I think it's showing. And I think it's showing in a 98% strike vote.
And what's the reason they voted 98%?
The totally inadequate wages that they're now receiving, and the totally inadequate response that hospitals, through Health Labour Relations Association, has made to their demands.
Are you telling me that if I'm a registered nurse, God forbid, because I can't stand the sight of anything, and I'm here, and I'm an RN at 1362 under this proposal, that 150 feet or 10 feet downhill can be a practical nurse under their proposals, who will get the same this August.
Right.
That must cause, whether you like it or lump it, a lot of annoyance among
Well,
nurses.
98.1% strike vote, Jack.
Victoria, good morning.
Hello. I just want to say that I am a management consultant who has worked quite a bit with the hospitals. I find that the whole hospital system really is in a disgraceful mess, but the fact that these women, that these nurses are being taken advantage of because of the motivation that they have, and the fact that they are truly an essential service. In fact, they're one of the few that are life and death. I find it incomprehensible. I don't understand why they've been allowed to go behind so far, and I think that it's time that the people in the health services put the whole system back into order. I'd like to hang up, please. And listen.
Thank you very much. Well, he sympathizes with you up to a point all the way. What he's saying, in effect, as a management consultant, is that you people, too, are part of the reasons for the fall behind. Correct?
Yeah, I don't think we can deny that we've got a little bit to do with it, but it takes, you know, many people to
Fair
reach
enough.
the situation.
Go ahead, please.
Yes, I'm a nurse. I work at Vancouver General. I went to university for 4 years to gain my education. I have a Bachelor of Science in Nursing as well as a BA, a General BA. I'm now a senior nurse on the floor I work on. I've been working for 2 years. I just like people to know really what our job takes in. It's many jobs. It's not just your technical things, but it's also the very basics that nursing used to have to contend with. It's your basic cleaning, your emptying bedpans. If people think that it's just a practical nurse that empties the bed.
What are you talking about, emptying bedpans?
We do everything from emptying bedpans to run highly sophisticated technical machinery. I work in a specialized area. It's life or death, and it's very stressful, and I have a lot of responsibility. I've been in charge after 2 years of the floor when our senior people are not on, like the head nurse. And for 1 day of being in charge, I made an additional $2 for that day in charge, and it was a headache. It was very stressful. And I just want to say that I think a lot of nurses are very angry and frustrated because they feel that they're not really getting what we should be getting.
What do you mean an extra $2?
Pardon me?
How would you get $2 extra?
I got $2 extra.
That's the rate for relieving in a higher rated position. You get $2 a day. So you end up running the whole unit. The hospitals generously give you 25 cents an hour.
That's crazy. Was that a legacy from something in the past?
Yes, it's a bit of a tale.
Have you demanded that be changed?
Yes, we have, because one of the other real problems that we have is that there is not a big enough spread in percentages between the general duty nurses and the people in the senior positions like the head nurses and supervisors. And that's a very big problem to us, and we certainly are trying to cope with that one along with. We talk about the basic rate, but there's also, to my mind, the senior positions are not need to be upgraded.
Anything else, nurse?
Yes. I also work shift work, of course, and I'm married, and I find it very difficult. It does sort of cut in on things when you have to work nights and you have different things to... Anyway, I'm just very frustrated. It's a hard job mentally.
Are you prepared to strike?
Emotionally, the whole work.
Are you prepared to strike?
Yes, of course I am.
Thank you. There's no doubt about it, though, that patient care will suffer, even if you're ordered back or if you cooperate with the hospitals for essential services. Patient care is going to suffer.
Yes, patient care will suffer.
Elective surgery would be down the tube.
You know, Jack, one time, about 6 years ago, we took a strike vote, and we got to the point in one hospital of meeting with management, our strike committee, and management said to me at that time that every single nurse is essential. We cannot let anybody go, which really gives you a story about the short staffing of nurses and what the public is and the government and the administrators are expecting those nurses to cope with.
I suppose that tells its own story, that.
Yep.
Thanks, nurse. Next one. Go ahead, please.
Yes, I just wanted to lead a bit more into what they just started to about some of our benefits, because that's where your RN who has 10, 20 years experience is really being hurt. Anywhere else you go, if you've got any other professional who's looking for a job, if they've got years of experience and special skills and previous training, that's taken into account. Well, with the RN, she's got a 3-month portability in which that has any effect, that she can carry 3 months portability. So if you take any more than 3 months off to further your education, then what happens is she drops down to a second year level, I believe it is. She goes back down from second year, from top year level, in spite of the fact that she can have 10, 20 years behind her.
Okay, your point is clear. Is it correct? Is that the correct point, Malcolm?
In some instances, yes. We have what we call a portability period, that if you move from one hospital to another, if you move within 3 months, then you port all your benefits. If you're out longer than 3 months, then you revert back to the lower ranges. However, if you get education leave, if the hospital agrees to education leave, then you don't lose it. But not too many hospitals are agreeing to education leave.
But I can take 3 months leave of absence in the summer without pay and come back to the same status.
In a different hospital.
But not in the same hospital.
Oh, it must be in a different hospital.
That's right. But there's another thing that I think the caller is touching on too, is that there is a section in our collective agreement called credit for previous experience, that if you come back into the workforce and not under the terms of portability, that you move up the increment scale depending upon your years of experience. And roughly it is 1 increment to 2 years of experience. So you do lose, you drop down.
You get something, but don't know. Are you trying to correct that this time?
We've asked for an improvement in it, yes.
Thank you, nurse. Go ahead, please. Where are you? You're not there. Are you there? You gone away? Go ahead, please.
Good morning.
Morning.
I fully support the nurses' intention to strike, but I'm really wondering how they ever got so far behind in the first place. AIB and other things notwithstanding, it would seem that the nurses have had their heads buried in the sand for years. I would like any 3 of them to comment on that.
Let's get all 3 of them to comment. Have you had your head buried in the sand for years?
I don't think I've had my head buried in the sand, but we have had probably 8 years of third-party intervention in the settlement of our collective agreements.
Either by arbitration or by AIB?
Or, yes, yes.
Well, that's correct. For the last 8 years, there's either been an arbitration board the last time round. Before that was the anti-inflation board. Before that was a binding industrial inquiry commissioner. And that's the point we're making this year, that the nurses have to have a chance to vote on an offer. and the nurses have to be able to either accept it or turn it down.
Just a minute. The vote you took just now was on a strike, yes or no?
That's
right.
Will you have a vote? Have you had a vote on their offer?
No.
No. Your executive committee has power to not to put it to the vote if they don't want it.
The negotiating committee has
Negotiating committee.
Yeah, but I think a 98% strike vote is a strong indication that HLRA's offer was not acceptable to the nurses.
No, but eventually if you get a half-decent offer, will you have a ballot of all your membership?
Most definitely.
Mail ballot, I suppose, or whatever.
Whatever.
Whatever, but it will be a ballot.
Anyway. Hold on, please. After the break. My guests this morning are Nora Paton, Chief Executive Officer of the RNABC, Carole Needham, who is a member of the Negotiation Committee, and Malcolm Wilkinson, who is the Chief Labour Negotiator, staff person, staff nurse. Oh,
Staff
yes.
person.
Staff researcher, negotiator. You're not a nurse?
Nope.
Why not? All members of the RNABC.
The wages aren't good enough.
Yeah. Right on, Carole.
Not enough money in it for you. Go ahead, please.
I'd just like to comment that I was a patient at Lionsgate Hospital in North Vancouver for a month, and I was just released last week, and I'd just like to say that I got excellent care from both the RNs and the LPNs and the nursing orderlies.
How do you stand on the strike?
I'm fully in agreement with it. In fact, all the patients in my ward were in full agreement with the strike. We felt that...
That's because they were well on the road to recovery.
Well, there was quite a bit of disparity between the nurses and the LPNs.
You talking about wages?
Yeah. There wasn't enough, rather.
Okay, sir. Thank you very much. Vernon, BC, go ahead.
Hello, Jack.
Yep.
My wife's a nurse, and she recently came home with a problem. She said that if a doctor gives a wrong drug or makes a drug error, it's the nurse's responsibility, and she's held responsible for the life of the patient. Is this true? I'd like to ask.
On the face of it, it's not quite true all the way, whatever the complications are. And you want to deal with that or not?
The only thing I could say, Jack, if the doctor actually gave the drug, then the responsibility lies on his shoulders.
Very complex situation. Trail, BC, go ahead.
Hello, Jack.
Yes.
I see you're looking good on the TV today.
Always do.
I'm going to have to take the opposite opinion to all those people calling in, though.
Okay, have at them.
Well, I've worked with nurses before, and I'm afraid they tend to snob it over every other worker in the place. Most of them are married. They don't really require the higher wages. They're not supporting families like most of our guys are. And I really think that they're right out of line under strike vote.
Okay, nurses are married snobs. That's what he said, Carole. What do you say?
That's what he said, but I think his interpretation is a little bit wrong there.
How many of the nurses are married? Two-income families. Not that that's relevant to the job.
I don't know, Jack, but there are a lot of unmarried nurses. There are a lot of nurses who are single parents who are supporting a family. And I'd like to see the information that caller had. If he's got data on that, I'd like to see it, because I don't think it's true.
Single parents, because they're the most obnoxious people in the world to get along with.
Thank you. You're a member of HEU? Yeah. Put him down as somebody who's doubtful about your cause, will you, please? Go ahead, please.
Yes, good morning, Jack, and good morning to your guests there. And I do support their requirements that they're asking for, but I have 3 questions, if I may, Jack.
Yes, please, go ahead.
First of all, they give very, very poor representation far as other provinces are concerned on what they're making and comparison. For instance, if they get their raises and what they're asking for, they will be at least 25% higher than nurses in some of the provinces.
Okay, that's point 1. Point 2?
Point 2 is that we just got over, and if you remember, all the financial troubles that we had in the Vancouver General, and it was mainly money problems. Now, if we give these nurses what they're asking for, and if I stand to be corrected, Jack, $50 million.
40 to 50.
And perhaps even more. Are we not putting an extra heavy burden onto our hospitals again? And where's the money supposed to come from?
Next question.
Next question is, they sat there this morning and tell you that they've gotten almost $1 million into their strike fund, and they tell you they don't have any money.
No strike fund. They said they've almost $1 million in the labour negotiation union section of their association, and that they've hired over the years, and it's costing more money all the time, 22 people for that. Is that right?
Right.
So let's take your first 2 points. You'll be 25% above nurses in some other provinces.
May be true. But I think what you have to look at is you have to look at the fact that in British Columbia, wage rates are considerably higher than in the rest of the country. And doesn't it strike you as odd that the nurses' wage rates in British Columbia are not the highest in the country? If there's to be fairness internally in the province, then nurses' rates in BC should be the highest in the country. And the fact is they're not.
Is it not a fact that the listener puts to you quite cogently that $40 to $50 million extra on the health service plus the HEU is going to have to come from somewhere?
But remember where hospitals are financed from. Hospitals are financed by grants from the provincial government. And it's entirely up to the provincial government to determine how much money the Vancouver General Hospital gets.
You mean it's a question of priorities, whether it's a new bridge
Right.
on Ellis Island, a new one through the Coquihalla, or more money for health care?
Yes.
That's exactly the question, yeah.
Florence Nightingale has disappeared in the attitude towards wages. Is that correct?
Let me say that Florence Nightingale was probably the first nurses unionist. She fought for nurses, and if you really look at Florence Nightingale's story, that we use her name in the very wrong context.
Fair enough. I accept the rebuke. Go ahead, please.
I've been in the hospital too, and I don't really see why nurses should be paid that much more than the practical nurses, since the practical nurses do all the nursing. You see your registered nurse perhaps once during the day, once in the evening shift, and that's it. The practicals do all the work.
Carole?
The nurse has the responsibility for the patient care. Now, she also has the responsibility of delegating that patient care at the local level, but she does have the responsibility for the care in total and looking out for the carrying out the doctor's orders that are ordered on that patient. And she also has the responsibility of being able to assess situations. The practical might be doing the actual day-to-day nursing care, but the nurse is the one that's responsible.
Are you overwhelmed? Is a nurse at the station overwhelmed with paperwork?
That's what she does. She does the paperwork.
Is she overwhelmed with paperwork?
In some institutions she could be, if they don't have clerical people.
Anyway, I gather you're not in favor of a strike by the nurses.
I'm not. I remember when nurses worked like galley slaves and didn't get paid the way they do.
But then everybody worked like galley slaves. Times have changed.
I should say they have.
Thank you, ma'am. Go ahead, please.
Yes, thank you, Jack. I'm wondering if your body there is representing the Psych Nurses Association of BC also.
Flight nurses?
No. Psychiatric nurses.
Oh, psychiatric nurses. No, that's...
The Registered Nurses Association Labor Relations Division does hold a joint certification with the Registered Psychiatric Nurses Association for those nurses that are directly employed by the provincial government. And we are currently in negotiations with the Government Employee Relations Bureau on that collective agreement.
Not involved in this one?
We're not involved in this one at all. I'm getting, the message I'm getting is we pay 1.5%, I'm a psych nurse, 1.5% of our salary per month as opposed to your 0.5%, and you are the best that we can afford. We have no strike fund. You're a representative for the RNs, yet the psych nurses have no voice. I really don't understand. It's terribly confusing. I feel on occasion that we are highly overpaid, and I'm sure you must agree with me that during nurses' rounds and nursing stations, there will be sometimes an hour between shift changes where there is nothing to do except sit around and talk.
You're talking about psych nurses?
No, I'm talking about the RNs.
You feel that RNs are highly overpaid?
I think we all are in the health field. I could be a butcher, a bus driver. I could have been anything I wanted to be if I wanted to make that kind of money. Someone touched on the fact that we are professionals and we're not behaving as such. I feel it very contradictory, and I feel that these people are incompetent in the sense that they're representing a union, they're negotiating, and I'm wondering if they know what the hell they're talking about.
That's you people.
Well, I think the fact is that that you have to remember that the demands that we put on the bargaining table are the proposals that are generated by all the nurses in the province. We have input from every nurse into the province through regional meetings, through provincial.
Just like the IWA.
Right. And the proposals that went on the bargaining table are the proposals put forward by the nurses. I didn't generate them, Nora didn't generate them.
Where is the money going? Where is the $1.5 million or $2 million? There's no strike fund, there's no nothing.
Did you hear that earlier on? Did you hear the answer earlier on?
Yeah. We have revenue on an annual basis now of something less than $1 million.
Where's it going?
And hang on, we service about 15 or 16,000 nurses in the province with Nora, about 140 different certifications. And that means we have to travel out to the various hospitals. We handle grievances, arbitrations, and probably 10 or 12 different sets of negotiations a year.
So this is one of the 200 unhappy members who voted against the strike. Is that correct?
Oh, no, I didn't have any voice in it.
Or your psychiatric certification?
I'm a psych nurse. I didn't have any voice in it. But all I'm getting is this poor me syndrome from the RN. You people state you go off out on these sprees and represent people. You travel throughout BC. You go across Canada to meetings. Who pays for that? Who pays for your food, your lodging, gas?
You do.
The RNs out of their 0.5% or whatever per month.
Same as any other union. Surely that's self-evident, isn't it?
But shouldn't there be something left over for a strike fund? There is no strike fund. They're going to self-define essential services. Then, okay, fine, those nurses are going to go to work. They're just the essential service nurses. Then what the hell? The jobs left over must be able to be handled by someone other than an RN.
Okay, just 1 second. I want to ask a very key question. If and when you strike, will you pick at the hospitals?
I think, Jack, it's fair to say that if we strike, then we will strike in the most effective manner we can. Okay. Because we don't have a strike fund, we have to be very, very effective. And that's why we've taken a provincial strike vote.
Can anybody do your job if you're away?
No, I don't think so.
Can an LPN do it? Oh, well...
no, they can't, Jack.
No.
Do you have support from the other HEU people in any action you take?
We have just finished taking a strike vote. We have not yet said we're going on strike, but we will be contacting the other unions if
Webster after the break.
Necessary.
Just the basic facts. Correct me if I'm wrong, Nora Paton, Chief Executive Officer, Registered Nurses Association of British Columbia. You've got an offer at the moment, which may be sweetened by HLRA, but at the moment for their 18% over, how many? 21%?
21% over 2 years.
You say, no way.
That's right.
What you want is a 1-year contract instead of a 2-year contract. You want a catch-up of $145 a month on the basic rate right now, right? You want 18% on top of that, and you want fringe benefit adjustments.
That's right.
And how many nurses actually voted for the strike again? I forget.
There were almost 11,000 voted in favor of the strike.
And you have some kind of vague plan, whereas without being ordered by the Labour Relations Board, if you struck, you would supply what somebody regards as essential services.
Well, you may call it a vague plan. We're a little bit reluctant, of course, to reveal all of our strategy at this point in time, except to say to the public that there will be a lot of advance warning, and we certainly hope that it will never come to an actual withdrawal of service, but we are prepared to do it to get them to meet our demands.
Fair enough. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, Jack, I work at Shaughnessy Hospital and I'm a cleaner. I work right behind these nurses, and I think that any nurse that can get up at 6:30 in the morning and empty bedpans deserves a raise, and that's all I have to say.
Thank you. Excuse a stupid question, Carol. Do nurses do bedpans?
Certainly they do.
I thought there was a jurisdictional division there. See how wrong I can be?
It's under other related duties.
Oh. Quinnell, go ahead, please. Quinnell,
Hello.
speak up.
I'm a registered nurse in Quinnell, and I just have some of the phone calls have upset me a great deal. The fellow that phoned in and said that to the effect that all nurses are married and they don't need a wage increase. I'm a single nurse. I do need my wages. If you go out and you try to pay the bills with what we're making now, there's not very much left over. And about the comments about the union from the one fellow, I've worked very closely with the union in the last 3 years, and about his comments about no strike fund. I've seen the union increase their staff in the last 3 years. I've seen productivity increased, and I think before people make comments on where the money is going, they should sit down and see the increase in service that we have got from Labor Relations Division. And that's all.
Thank you very much, nurse. Comox, I think, is next. Go ahead, please.
Okay. A fellow phoned just a while ago and implied that because a nurse is often a second wage earner in a family, that they don't warrant a fair package. Marital status is irrelevant. Nurses should be paid what they are worth. I support the nurses' demands. What could be more important than health care?
Carol?
Definitely. I think that's a very good comment.
Thank you very much. Go ahead, please.
Hi, I'd just like to say that obviously 98% of the nurses are behind what the bargaining committee is doing for us. We appreciate what they're doing. Where we were 2 years ago at the last bargaining session, the man that was appointed to represent us in our bargaining efforts told us that respect in the community made up for lack of wages. I mean, that's where we were at in the last time we were in bargaining.
Oh, somebody told you, well, HLRA told you that respect in the community made up for money?
Well, this is the fellow that was supposedly bargaining for us.
Oh, your man told you that. That wasn't you, Malcolm.
Not me, no.
Okay. No names, please. Go ahead.
This is before we got the expert services of Mr. Wilkinson. I think that's where the anger began 2 years ago. I think it's just been built up on and built up on. Working in the nursing force, I've seen the last 6 months or so, I think, seen the nurses getting very despondent and a lot of nurses looking for other jobs in other areas because it's just not worth the lack of respect, the lack of help that we're getting, including from within the hospital system itself as far as educating ourselves and improving ourselves. Not only that, in the attitude from the public towards us, I think the majority of people these days are much in support of what we're doing, and I don't think they're beginning to realize, or maybe they're just beginning to realize, what effect it is going to have if we go out. This fellow that thinks that the people that are going in to do the basic work are going to be, the extra work is going to be picked up by people who are going to be able to do it. I think he's going to find out he's very much in the wrong, because there are going to be a lot of jobs that aren't going to be able to be done towards people. And if people don't stand up and tell the government what they want as far as health care, not just in nursing care, but in general health care, the whole system is going down the tube. And
well, look, Nora Paton won't answer this question. Maybe you will. If you go out and strike, will you pick at the hospitals?
Oh, I'll do anything I can to improve. I'm talking about...
See, I'm thinking of the implications of picketing.
I'm talking about general health care. I'm involved in nursing specifically, but I think the general public has to be made aware of the fact that a lot of the stuff as far as equipment goes and services available is going down the tube, and we're trying to do our best to stop that right here and now.
No, you're right.
Yes. And Jack, I want to say something, even though you say I won't answer that question. If the situation gets to the point that we feel we must withdraw our services, let's not lose sight of the fact that the main objective is to get a settlement. We will do everything we can to get that settlement as fast as possible so that the public is not deprived of health care. And if it means picketing or it means the whole gamut of things, we'll do it to get a speedy settlement. But let's remember, we're not here to strike, we're here to get a settlement.
That's pretty. Thanks, ma'am. I'm going to take a few more. Go ahead, please.
Yes, I'm a registered nurse, and I work in a coronary care unit in one of the hospitals. And I'd just like to say that a hospital exists to provide patient care services, and the RNs are, in fact, that group of people which provide that service for which the hospital exists. And then also that there are maintenance categories in the HAU which are responsible for maintaining the building, and I just think that it's ludicrous that the people that maintain the building are being paid more, significantly more than those persons that provide the service for which the hospital exists. And I do have some figures in front of me here, and it says that those persons under the tentative HAU agreement by August 1st, 1980, if they agree to this contract, or this contract is ratified by the hospitals, those persons, excuse me, I'm having a hard time.
Make it quick.
Yes, those persons will be making, in fact, by August of 1980, $700 to $900 more than an RN being paid at her present rate as of right now.
Which persons, quickly?
The RNs?
No, which persons are going to be making $700 to $900 a month more?
The painters, the carpenters, the plumbers, the electricians of the hospital under the HAU agreement will be being paid more, $700 to $900 more than RNs are presently being paid for at their present rate right now, if they accept their tentative agreement.
Understood, and we covered that partly with the comparison with the practical nurse. Well, my thanks to Carole Needham, bargaining committee, negotiating committee, to Malcolm, I've got a block in your second name, Wilkinson, who's the chief negotiator for the RNABC, and to Nora Paton, chief executive officer, RNABC. I hope you get your settlement one way or another without any interference with healthcare. We've asked HLRA to appear if they so wish, and if they so wish, you'll get their side of the story just as frankly, I'm sure, as you got the RNABC side. Webster after the break. Little news story that I think you should know about. Dentists in British Columbia have been warned by the Ministry of Health to take very special precaution in dealing with refugees from Indochina because of the high incidence, 14 in 100, between 12 and 14 in 100, of people from that area who may be carriers of serum hepatitis, medically known as hepatitis B, I think is the proper name. Refugees who arrived in Canada after November the 13th, 1979, have all been tested. The status for this marked on a card and given to the immigrant to the country. Refugees who arrived before November 13, 1979 did not have such a test before they came to Canada. It is strongly recommended that dentists treating refugees first refer the patient to a doctor for this test for possibility of being a carrier of serum hepatitis. In medical treatment, the sterility factor is routine, and I am told and assured that it presents no great problem. In dental treatment, however, for anyone who is a carrier of hepatitis B, the dentists and the dental assistants have been warned to wear gloves, a mask and glasses when working on known carriers or persons who might have a high risk of infection. Children, the dentists have been told, and the doctors, do not present any hazard to other children in daycare centres or elsewhere, nor through living in a sponsor's home, where good hygiene practices are followed. And the advice, too, given by the BC Ministry of Health is that hepatitis B carriers do not present danger as food handlers or hospital personnel. I was talking to one of the BC medical people yesterday, and also in the ministry memo here. This factor is not to be considered surprising or a cause for alarm. The potential for transmission of infectious hepatitis B is low, relatively low in normal circumstances. But it is something on which medical personnel, doctors and nurses and dentists have been warned to take special care. I give you this as a matter of public information which everybody should know about without it causing alarm, despondency, or any presence of considerable unrest. It's the dentists who are more concerned, I think, in the actual treatment than, say, even the doctors. That was quite a program with the nurses, wasn't it? Hope HLRA responds and appears on the program perhaps early next week, after the break.
I know what she said, that you went, okay. You win.
They're quite nice.
Yeah. That was timed perfect.
Good.
Our UFO lady is here at 10:30, so.
Welcome on the satellite to Fort Simpson in the Northwest Territories. Linda, tomorrow.
Tomorrow we have Alec MacDonald, the Vancouver East MLA.
Oh, and the big noise in the NDP for the opening of the session tomorrow. Should be good. 9 a.m. precisely.